You've been asking for it, and here it is, the Lincoln Wealth Builder IUL product review. Let's get right into it. We've had a lot of people comment on previous product reviews who want the Lincoln Wealth Builder IUL to be reviewed on this channel, and so we are here to deliver. So like every product review, we're going to run through really the biggest mechanics and details on the contract or the policy illustration that make the most sense for you to look at really as a policy holder, as a future policy holder. And if your goal is maximum tax-free income, maximum cash accumulation, this channel is absolutely for you, because we're going to be using that lens to view if these policies are really good, bad, anywhere in between. So I'm excited to do that for you. Let's go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to share my screen and we'll go through the few mechanics that make sense to look at if your goal is cash growth and accumulation. So the first thing we'll talk about is Lincoln just really as a carrier. Carrier-wise, they are highly rated. They're A-rated. They're financially stable. I have no problem working with them. We have worked with them in the past, and they do well from a customer service perspective. I'd say middle of the pack, nothing horrible to kind of glean on there. And in terms of fees, that would be the next thing that we want to look at. Their fees on this particular IUL, if we're designing it with the smallest fees as possible, minimum death benefit, maximum cash design, this specific product falls on the more expensive side of bottom line, no bare bones type of fees. It's more expensive. And in fact, if you add riders on the policy that a lot of agents probably do, it will get way too expensive to be able to use or recommend. And so from a bare bones perspective, no optional riders, no optional extra fees for extra bells and whistles. This is on the more expensive side. If you add all of those things, it actually gets even more expensive, which is no good for the goal of income. So we're going to get right into the indexes, which is really one of the biggest parts of these policies. Is what do you have to choose from when you want your dollars to be invested with a 0% floor with some upside? And they have a majority S&P based indexes. I would say that's not the worst thing in the world, but it is something to note. A majority, I would say 80-90% of their indexing options are S&P based. So they have the traditional S&P accounts, your S&P 500. It is linking a point-to-point directly related to the S&P. They also have some volatility-controlled S&P indexes here. The first one, S&P Dynamic, it's going to kind of target a 15% volatility level. We're going to have one that targets a 10% volatility level. So these are volatility-controlled indexes, but they're still basing off the S&P, which I would say is actually pretty cool. And then their other diversifier is the Fidelity Dividend 5% VCI, which is targeting a 5% volatility. This, again, is one of their main volatility-controlled indexes. This one does not have a cap, but it was only created a few years back. So it doesn't have a super long track record. This was kind of created for the IULs mainly to limit volatility, make sure it's giving you the best return, hopefully, but no track record as of now. So now let's get into the actual details of caps, rates, bonuses, stuff like that we actually want to see on these indexes. So as you can see, majority S&P. The only option that is not S&P based is the Fidelity Dividend here. That is an uncapped and the only uncapped option on the policy. It comes with a 1% bonus, but if you read the fine print, only 0.25% of that bonus is guaranteed. And for that reason, I would say there's a huge knock on this policy, because if we're looking at these bonuses, a lot of them are a lot higher than what the guaranteed rates are. And I would assume, and we're going to make a video later about this, I would assume that the illustration is going to count on the current bonus and not count on just the guaranteed bonuses, which creates a problem. It creates a problem when we're showing these illustrations that are kind of juicing the numbers on over and above what the carrier promises. We're not fans of that, but it's declared right now. The bonus is 1% with this Fidelity index. Their S&P Dynamic, this is the 15% volatility. They're going to try to aim for a little bit more volatile than a traditional VCI. Has a 12.75% index. If we're comparing that to their S&P, that's a higher cap than their S&P just traditional, which is they call it traditional. 11.5% is what they have there. They have higher caps on these volatility controlled indexes, which makes sense. These are not going to be extremely volatile, similar to the S&P. They're going to limit the volatility. Higher caps, we see this all the time in industries. Typically, the volatility controlled indexes actually don't have any caps. So it's interesting these ones do. But again, they're higher than the S&P. They're not tracking directly the S&P. This would be the best option, and that would be at least the best option to illustrate the policy at, because we're not promising any non-guaranteed bonuses on the carrier letterhead, on the illustration. That's the last thing we want to do on these policies. And my guess is most agents would ask the person doing the illustrations for them, or when they're running it themselves, they're going to ask which and how do I get the biggest income number? And that would be using these indexes. So if you're seeing an illustration that has these indexes listed as kind of the illustration allocations, then I would say to pause and ask them to illustrate, maybe with the S&P traditional, so you can kind of get a feel, because they're showing non-guaranteed bonuses. If this was showing 0.75% as a bonus and all of it was guaranteed, I'd have no problem with it. But only a third of that bonus is guaranteed. And when that gets stacked up every single year, that adds up to be a way higher number than what is contractually promised, on top of how the policy is performing. So that just creates a problem on the illustration, and that's kind of what we're here to solve. So now we get down to the 2-year options. Now, typically we're not a fan of 2-year indexes because you're actually not taking advantage of the volatility on these policies if you have a longer segment. If you have to wait 2 years to get credit on a policy, and then you have to wait another 2 years to get another credit, that could actually really hurt your policy performance because of how these policies start over. You get no downside risk. They start over every policy segment. You're lessening your chances there to get the upside and ride the upside. However, I would say this is one of the best S&P, in general, this is one of the best 2-year options that I have seen in the industry. And it's a traditional S&P option. It's following the S&P directly, and it's a 26% cap. So if you divide that by 2, it's essentially a 13% cap on per year, except it's 26% for 2 years. I'd say that's one of the best 2-year indexes in the industry, but otherwise I would not suggest, these 2-year indexes in general. So now we get to a page where it says, and it's titled Indexed Loan Account Details. And this is referring to the option that you have when you choose an index loan. And that tells me something right away. It tells me that this loan, their index loan, or another way to say that is a participating loan, their participating loan is not fully participating, because when you take a loan, typically a fully participating loan, you get to keep the interest earning power in whatever indexes you choose as if they never left. In this product, you get a full different array of options to choose from, which is a bad thing. That's a bad thing. It's not fully participating. So now these are our options when we choose a participating loan. And let's just go here, for example, and just to tell you up front, they're all basically a worse option than the traditional indexes. So for example here, S&P 500 on the traditional indexes, without taking a loan, you have an 11.5% cap. If you're taking a loan, the index loan account, you only have a 9.25% cap. Yes, you have this bonus. They actually add on the bonus to an S&P account, which is not very traditional. It's good if it was guaranteed. It is not guaranteed. Even if this bonus was added on, we still be looking at a 10% cap versus an 11.5% cap. So when they allow you to take out a indexed loan, they are removing the options that you had to choose from and giving you a whole new plethora of options that are all worse. So in terms of stacking up with the rest of the industry, their indexing options, I like them. A lot of them are S&P based. They have some bonuses that are not guaranteed. That would be a knock on Lincoln. However, I would also want some diversity. I would want maybe a different index, not just an S&P based, maybe one more diverse group of indexes. But they have a lot of good things working here. But traditionally speaking, we need some more diversity. We need higher caps on the traditional S&P, and we need more guarantee bonuses if there are bonuses at all. So we've now covered the indexes. We've now covered the indexed loan account details. Let's go to the actual loan provisions and see what they have. So here are the loan options that you have to choose from. They're also adding, with withdrawal. If you are new to the IUL, you can always withdraw up to your basis tax-free. If you want to withdraw more than that, you're going to be taxed. And so that is why this typically is not a good option. If you wanted to use it for, long-term income, I would not suggest a withdrawal. The fixed loan, AKA typically this is called the wash loan, they're going to credit you and charge you around the same amount, meaning it is non-participating. You lose the interest earning power of the dollars. It's a less risky option. Every carrier has this option. The index loan is what we're actually looking at. This is what typically differentiates the carriers, whether it's going to be a fixed charge that the carrier is charging you, a variable charge. Is it fully participating? Is it participating at all? Is it half participating? That's what we want to know. And we have a ton of videos solely on what loan provisions are good for you, what even are loan provisions, why are they important. That is for a different video, and I would suggest you check it out on our channel. This specific product has an index loan. That's what's called typically a participating loan. And let's just read it. The amount of the loan will be transferred. So that's all we need to read to know that this is not fully participating. It's going to be transferred from your chosen indexes to the indexed loan account in which it is allocated. Okay, so you get to choose, but it's going to be transferred into new options that we just covered, which makes it not fully participating. There are carriers out there, a lot of good carriers out there that are fully participating. They don't change the options on you when you decide to take an index loan. The good thing about this loan provision is it is a guaranteed rate of 5.5%, meaning the carrier contractually cannot change the rate at which you are going to be borrowing from them, which is awesome. That makes the income even more predictable because that rate cannot hike up. If that rate could hike up, let's say to 8%, you're gonna have to count on less income because there is something of a variable going on when you're taking the income out. We eliminate all of that once we're taking a guaranteed index loan, meaning the guaranteed rate, 5%. So you're getting charged 5.5%. You get credited however the policy earns interest. So I would say this is half of an ideal participating loan provision. Ideally, we're getting a cheaper rate. 5.5% is good, not great. And then this is not fully participating. They change the options on you once you start taking that loan. And so those are really the main things and mechanics we're looking for when people send in a policy to be reviewed by our team. We're looking at the carrier, we're looking at the fees, we're looking at the indexes, what they provide, the caps, the bonuses, are they guaranteed, are they not guaranteed, the diversity in the indexes, and then the loan provisions. And now we can see what this actually shows from a projection standpoint. $50,000 a year, this is an asset reposition example, to where you got $350,000 that you want deployed in as efficiently as possible. We're using that 6% illustration rate, conservative, below historic average, minimum death benefit design. So we only have to purchase $744, for a 45-year-old male. And then you'd be generating, $49,000 tax-free with no risk of the market down the road. So that's a typical example of how the policy ledger looks. I wanted to show one more thing, and this will be quick. It's something we're not including in this illustration. It's something definitely to look at though. So here lies the page that talks about their performance multiple rider details. For the sake of this illustration, we didn't use any of these on the policy, and there's a reason for that. We don't suggest these. These are expensive ways to boost your indexes. And so, for example, let's look here. We have some fixed bonus options. What happens if you want to choose option 2 or option 3? They're going to charge you a certain amount of the cash that is in these chosen indexes, 2%. So your new floor is now negative 2%. They're charging you 2% and you get a 45% boost. They multiply your index performance by 1.45. or 1.9, essentially almost doubling your performance, but they're going to charge you 4%, they're going to charge you 2%. If your policy performs at 0, you get 0, and you are charged that 2% or that 4%. There are no guarantees in these multipliers because 0 multiplied by anything is still 0. So is it worth the risk? I would say unless you are extremely happy with risk and comfortable taking risk, even if it means doing it in an expensive way, I don't think this makes sense to have on a policy. Maybe if it was cheaper, maybe if it was 1% or less than 1%, it could make sense to do this multiplier. But charging you an arm and a leg to access kind of a boost, I don't think makes sense. I think a lot of agents will use this to boost the numbers and explain the bells and whistles of a policy without fully explaining the downside, which means extra fees and not a happy person and not a happy client. And so I wouldn't suggest those, but you could talk about that with your agent a little bit more. Otherwise, this is really all I have for this illustration. And so if you're getting pitched this Lincoln WealthBuilder IUL and you want to know if this is the right product for you and really what the design is doing for you, maybe it's not designed well, maybe the product isn't the best fit. If you want to know for certain, you should head to our website and book a discovery call with our team. We can review your policy illustration for free. And that typically takes 15 to 30 minutes with one of our team members where we will chat about really what you're hoping to achieve. And we specialize in maximizing these types of policies for tax-free income and future cash accumulation. And so if that's what you want to do, you should definitely book a call with our team. Be on the lookout for more reviews, more bad design videos, because we will be ripping those out this summer. Take care.